The new generation Audi A6 as the sporty one, the Audi S6. That review is today on Autogefuehl, your #1 resource for in-depth car reviews and your #1 community to discuss cars with Thomas. We have the Avant right here, but everything we say will also count for the sedan, and we'll also talk about the different engine variations there are for different markets. Exterior, interior and the driving experience, now in Full HD, full screen and full length. Let's go! The newest generation of the Audi A6 has in general a quite sporty look with this huge single frame front grille. The S version, of course, a little bit sportier trim. You can see here the black frame around the grille. Also in the lower part you have those black contrasts. Also the fin structure is just a little bit different to give it a little bit more aggressiveness. Then those headlamps are also in this very sharp design. They start with LED standard. Optionally, you can get those matrix LED lights with an elaborate high beam function. And by the way, this very color here is called Tango Red, and soon we'll dance with the car. 4.93 meters, 16'2" or 194 inches is the total length of the A6 in general, both Avant and sedan. And as I said earlier, besides the different trunk volume, everything we say today will be the same both for the estate and the limousine or sedan. Also, a base A6 starts with 17-inch wheels. Then the S models get 20-inch as standard. Those ones are the optional 21-inch. They are really massive. Of course, you always have to think about, about the comfortable ride or not. Rather, I would just stick with the standard 21. Also, suspension comes standard with an adaptive sports suspension that is stiffer here in the S models. Optional for the first time now also an air suspension. Very interesting choice there too. I'll tell you more about that later on. And also interesting technology feature. Optional, first of all, a differential lock is available and also the rear axle steering 2 degrees in the parallel direction above 60 kilometers an hour and 5 degrees in the opposite direction than the front wheels below 60 kilometers an hour to increase the agility. Very interesting technology option. We also have it here on this very vehicle. And by the way, the S models also get a contrasting mirror cap. You can get it in an aluminum look or here also in the black one, and also together with some black frames. Would you go for an Avant, by the way, or for the sedan? You also get bigger brakes with the S models. However, optionally, you can also go for those ceramic brakes. We don't have them here today. And they are actually also not really necessary. They also are in the extra cost of a normal small car. And then again, they're more something for the racetrack. Those ones here will also do just fine. In the rear, the S model is not, let's say, too different. You can see here also with this pack, it has this dark stripe all across the vehicle, horizontally drawn tail lamps, the S6 logo. And the lower part, this will be very interesting because you can see obviously 4 exhaust pipes, but those are really pure visual. And the reason for that is the package. They had to put different parts in different areas. For example, also the particulate filter. And so they say the packaging reasons were the reason that they could not go for real exhaust tips. The real one is actually underneath the vehicle. Well, what do you think about that? And, by the way, the ride height here with the sport suspension is 20 millimeters lower. It's 10 millimeters lower with the S7, by the way, because the S7 is already 10 millimeters lower, or the A7 in general is 10 millimeters lower than an A6. But here the A6 has a normal ride height for the usual sedans and Avants. Therefore, then the S model 20 millimeters lower. So, what about the engines here for the S6? In the US, you get the 2.9-liter V6 with 450 horsepower, and the acceleration figure is 4.5 seconds, 600 newton meters of torque, by the way. And here in Europe, we get the 3-liter TDI, less horsepower, so 350 horsepower, but more newton meter, 700 newton meters of torque. Very interesting. However, still half a second slower. About 5 seconds is then the acceleration to 100 kilometers or 62 miles an hour. All-wheel drive distribution is standard, 40% front, 60 in the rear, then a little bit adaptive, but with the rear wheel bias. Well, very interesting, this engine strategy. I will tell you more about it in the driving part, but the pros and the cons of using a diesel here in Europe and why they are actually doing it. But let me just first cover a technology point here, because all of the big new Audi engines, also the petrol ones, they now come with a mild hybrid system, 48-volt board net. This enables a sailing function, and here those performance models, they also additionally get an electric compressor. Wow, that's somewhat technology overkill, but it enables a little bit better boost, for example, also from the standstill, and at the same time promise lower consumption. Is that true? We'll find out in the driving part very soon. This is the car key with an S badge at the other side. And of course, keyless entry is available. When you put your hand on the outside, you close it. In this case here also the mirrors flip in, and when you put on the hand on the inside, very easy solution, then the car opens right again. What I find quite strange is when you want to open the door directly, they have a special opening function, and it sometimes gets a little bit stuck, so to say, because this very first part, when you open it like this, and then you see here, it pops out automatically just a little bit. This is supposed to be like an entry help, but then again, if you open it very fastly, it's somehow an unnatural feeling. Then inside of the doors, plush materials on the top, leatherette alike, very nicely done, high build quality, microfiber inlets here for the S model. Even nice, one of my favorites, clicking sound for the window levers. Yeah. Then some smaller bottles do fit there, bigger ones could be a problem. Rest of the interior is rather dark scheme, special S steering wheel, perforated sides, and with the S badge logo right there. And then the seats, they usually start with a sportier seat, already sport seat, but then with a separated head restraint in the upper part. Then also with microfiber inside, and outside is still some animal skin part. That would be a standard seat. We have that in our other A6 review. Those ones here are the optional S Sport seats with integrated head restraint and this special quilting structure. It looks very fancy, but it's less comfortable on the long run. So I would rather advise you to stick with the base sport seats, not only because of the quilting, but also because of the seat form itself. Again, this also has this sporty look and this nice S stamp right there, but overall the base sport seats will do just fine. But if you want those from the form, they are also available with microfiber on the inside if you like. Now let's get inside. Well, it's normal sedan or estate seating position in this very segment. Yes, you maybe feel that you sit a little bit lower, but no, not that much. By the way, you see that the seat at the moment is very far pulled backward. If the ignition is on and I would close the door, then it would move forward. There's a comfort function that I can easier get in and out of the car. Also quite nice. The steering wheel starts with a manual control right here, up and down, and also for reach. It's also available then optional with an electric one. So even with a very expensive vehicle, they still hide some options you could still leave some more money with. 4 sport seats For S sport seats, they're still somewhat quite comfortable. Again, when you are on very, very long runs, it's better not to have the quilted structure on the seat. And also the other base sport seat allows you to move around a little bit more freely. I think that's good. And if you have the microfiber surface at the same time, you're then also not sliding around that much as you would right here. The lower part can be lengthened right there for taller people. And speaking about tall, when I have the seat in the lowest position, with 1m86 or 6'1", and yes, even if you're a subscriber, I always mention my height because there are still always questions like, oh, how tall are you, Thomas? So I always mention it. So there we are. Still leaves a lot of headroom, especially when you don't have the panoramic roof. This one here without one makes it a little bit dark here on the interior, but gives you more headroom. The interior overview, a very clean design, sharp design, wrapped tightly right here. Soft touch is mostly here in the back part, and then something like a table right there, very interesting here with the aluminum look, but then a lot of black piano lacquer used right there. That's not my special thing because it leaves a lot of fingerprints and so on, or you have to clean it all like with the dust and so on. Good size for the steering wheel, definitely, and the screen setup is here, virtual cockpit 12.3, that's also standard then, and here on the right side this one is 10.1 and the lower one is 8.6. In some base A6 models, there's also a smaller screen on the top part. And those ones are somewhat communicating to each other. I'll soon show you more about that. You also have a separate camera button right there with a nice camera view. There we see another small camera in the grass. Also with the drone view from above. This is, by the way, here, for example, because the trunk is opened. And you also have a 3D view where you can zoom in and out of the car. Here again, see the last camera is missing. There you don't see the rear, but this is quite impressive to see. You can also check out if you don't damage those rims. But it doesn't have the vehicle color. So our colors is red on the outside, but still shows in this unique color. Well, that's a detail, but not to leave it unmentioned. I would say let's get into the details here of the different screens because that's really interesting infotainment-wise. But what do you think here about the setup also in comparison to the competitors? And now the details to the screens. Here is a fast processor unit. There you can see the GPS route. You can see that it's really nice to drive. So pretty impressive system. You can always go back then right here to enter a new address, by the way. There you can see that the lower screen then switches around, and then you can, for example, here like write directly Frankfurt, for example. Don't have a good Frank. And then I could say like Furt. Let's see if it checks that. Yeah, Frankfurt. So switch to the current location. There it is. Then we go to Frankfurt. So there's one possibility. You can also use the voice command. Let's see. Drive me to Frankfurt Central Station.
Searching for Frankfurt Central Station along the route. There are no results along the route. I'll search around the current location.
So even when I have So there we are already, so that's quite cool. So even if we have a route programmed, then the system is searching for stops along the route. That's very interesting. Found out that for the very first time now. Then if it doesn't found anything, then it searches the general. But you see, this is good for the voice input or also, let's see, another voice input. I want to start a new one. Go back. There we go. Set temperature to 23 degrees. A little bit warm now, right?
I'll increase the temperature to 23 degrees.
So now we got temperature more. But I can also do it here like this. While driving, that's quite distracting, or like with hitting plus and minus, like here also with the vents. So the voice input for the temperature is actually quite helpful here. Other than that, if you don't have a GPS, it rather stays here with the AC view. Then the main menu, all we are touched. There's no like control knob or something. Apple CarPlay connection is possible then here with the cable, also for the Android Auto. The newest iterations of those Audi systems also are able to get the wireless CarPlay connection. And then, for example, with car, you can have the drive select. That is also available then with the button here at the lower part. Again, while driving, it's not a little bit distracting to reach that. What does change, we'll tell you more in the driving part. A head-up display is available for the car, but not in this very vehicle, so we'll keep concentrating on those virtual instruments only. You can zoom in with the thumb on the steering wheel, for example, in the map. You can also make it a little bit bigger, so that's really helpful while driving, keeping your eyes rather centered to the front. But you can also have the other, for example, this one, by the way, was now after like a very agile driving, but I'll tell you more about the consumption later on, how it really varies between agile driving and how low you can get it, because here 10 would be our maximum consumption for the day. You can really get it way lower, and this very, very interesting, I can promise you. And the middle console here with a nice brushed aluminum cover, shifting lever, pretty thick. Then here's a space to put your key if you don't want to leave it in your pocket. 12-volt power supply, and this is also nice with the metal knurling around. The cup holders are adaptive, different bottle size fit, no problem. And then there's this armrest. You can put it forward and backward, and also can put it up. Then you have two USB supplies right there, putting your phone there in with the cable for the smartphone connection or for charging, or also you could use a Bluetooth connection, then have the inductive charging pad, or then at some point when they have the newest software update there for the wireless CarPlay, then also the inductive charging makes sense. And getting in the rear, well, those are quite long cars, and you also can drive with tall adults here in the rear, no problem. There's also still a lot of legroom left, no problem. I mean, overall, the package of those vehicles isn't that good because they're pretty long and still don't offer so much room on the interior considering the length. But the overall room you have available, of course, is quite ample. Also headroom-wise, especially right here in the Avant, because it continues all the way back. And it's actually quite comfortable and cozy seating position here. If you compare it to the competitors, I think the Audi A6 is rather one that has a little bit more legroom than the other competitors. So you get along right here. You can adjust so much with the seat here. Other than that, you can actually flip it already from right here. That's possible. And you have the ISOFIX for the child seat and the outside seats each. The general design is the same as we have in the front. Also, when you have the microfiber, you will also have it here on the rear seats. Oh, and what about 3 passengers in the rear? Well, it works headroom-wise, but the seating surface here in the middle is very stiff. That's not that good. And there's a big all-wheel drive middle tunnel. So yeah, you can put your feet right and left next to it. But that's about it. You see this big middle tunnel right here. Oh, by the way, about the middle tunnel, what is nice that they could mount the AC unit here. An option, you can get a 4-zone AC here, even with seat heating for the rear. 2 more USB supplies. Last but not least, this middle armrest right there with foldable cup holders. They're also adaptive, and you can also use this one here as a ski hatch to load things through. With 565 liters, that's just 35 liters more on paper for the trunk capacity here for the Estate than for the sedan, but of course you have a better access here to the trunk. Right here, open space, this is the big advantage, and look here, very square dimensions. And also nice that this top cover, it raises together with the hatch and also has rails at the side, so a very nice and clean solution. Not so much space underneath, also again for the packaging reasons. This one here is an option. You can get this net to secure your luggage, for example, while racing. That is possible. And then let me give you some measurements as well, because right here, let's see. So in length right there, we get about 1.15 meters, and width is about 1 meter. And the height right here at the lowest point, just 40 centimeters, but here at the highest point is about almost 75 centimeters. So very well usable. But the question is, when I flip the seats now, right here, so it goes right there, and they already directly flip. That's difference to the A4 Avant, where they don't do that in that way. Strangely, criticized that recently also with the facelift. And now we have really ample of space, even to the seat as I would be driving. So the whole sticky is 2 meters in length, and that's easily reached right there. And to give you an example also with luggage inside, this one here is a fully loaded backpack. Need to put it in right there that it fits. So, for design reasons, there's a little flat design line right there, so it's somewhat limited, not those old boxy Estates. Well, they wouldn't probably sell nowadays, but then again limited you here. But overall, still a very well usable trunk overall. Or what do you think? And the closing safety test here, famous in Autogefuehl. That's a little bit too much torque for that closing mechanism. So guys, before we get to our longer driving part with some great motorway riding and high speed, I want to begin with a short preview of the agile driving of this vehicle. It is the upper mid-size segment, and those cars here already have some weight, but with the sporty suspension setup, they already can give you quite good agility. And here also look at how I control the steering wheel. This is a very progressive steering Audi is offering with that one here by standard equipment, so I don't have to turn the steering wheel that much. Very good precise control. Look at how smooth and precise I can control this one here, and I don't have to oversteer anything. And of course, we will drive this very same way up again. This will be even more exciting. You can see how fast I can catch up with the cars that are going down in a normal speed. Although I did not really exaggerate it too much or something. And actually, we'll go up here directly because otherwise I'll be stuck after those other cars. And we can also see the rear view camera right there, which is doing a good job. Nice resolution too. Then let's go up here, because then we can also hit a little bit more of the performance right there. And even uphill, wow, look at that acceleration, even uphill. Then nice on the brakes again, smooth feeling. So this car here then feels a little bit smaller than it actually is. It has some quite wide dimensions, but due to the agility, the adaptive suspension they have in here, also set on a sportier note, together with the 21 in this is also I'm just hitting the horn here now that my cameraman is standing on the outside and knows that I'm coming. Not sure which corner it was. I think it's corner above there. So because we're also doing some outside shots, yeah, I think it's the next corner up there. So the suspension again doing a good job. Then you also can hear the horn. And wow, I mean, look how smooth the riding here is. Of course, the road is very good. Yeah, but with those 21-inch wheels together with the little bit stiffer suspension, it's really cool for good roads here. Really nice. Yeah, here now accelerating out the corner, and the rear differential lock, that's option available, is also a good idea, definitely. But the Quattro all-wheel drive also distributes it, a little bit more rear wheel biased, but then you don't have power all just on one axle. If you have it on both, then you also can have some smooth acceleration. So this setup here with the adaptive suspension and the 21-inch wheels, I can recommend it definitely in general for good roads. But if you stick with the standard wheel size, that would also be a good idea to have a little bit more comfort, a little bit more room to play with that. And of course, if you stick to the optional air suspension, again, for your everyday driving life, this would be even more comfortable. So you feel some of the limits, of course, of this very segment. A mid-size vehicle is definitely sportier, but considering the size, they already get some good performance here on the road, and it's not as extreme as an RS would be. We also have a review of the previous generation of the RS6 on our channel if you want to check that out. But of course, question is again, petrol versus diesel also, especially in this case. We'll talk about more of that in the motorway driving part that's coming up right now. Now just enjoy with me some of those last corners here. Also with a nice view. Welcome to Thomas's Driving Lounge with the Audi S6 in this new generation. And we're pushed directed to the dynamic mode when we're going up this motorway. And that's already 100 when going uphill. So, one thing is for sure, already right now, we won't lack any performance. Here with 5 seconds to 100 kilometers or 62 miles an hour. It's 5.1 seconds here for this Avant, and 5 seconds it would be for the sedan. 5.1 seconds also for the S7, by the way. And if we think about the US with the 2.9 liter V6 that is coming up, that then would be even a little bit faster with 4.5 seconds. So half a second is a difference here for the S6 diesel. And if you think about the strongest so far diesel they have, which is not the S version, that's again half a second of a difference. So indeed, the difference between their strongest normal V6 TDI and this one here is not that huge as for the acceleration figure. And of course, you already heard it when accelerating. The biggest difference between the petrol and the diesel is surely the sound. There would be hardly any sound if they would not use a sound actuator, both for the exterior and for the interior. So indeed, when I'm pushing the throttle right here, and what you hear is the sound actuator. Here on the motorway, we'll face different speeds and different speeds limits. So I can also set the cruise control when we have a little slower part right here, and that's working pretty flawlessly, keeping the distance to the car in front of me, and you can relax just a little bit more. There's also the blind spot monitor on board. We'll experience that very soon when more cars are coming from the left. I'll show you that. Overall, the car gives you such a refined feeling. It's very silent in here. So let me just get on this lane, and then there's a car coming up now, and you'll see the blind spot monitor, which is very good option, which should work actually. Maybe it's deactivated. See about that. Driver's assist. Maximum. There it is. So, there you can see. So in this MMI, you can see that driver's assistant were put down for whatever reason. Here then, there you can see is also the blind spot monitor active when this yellow light is flashing. And actually, yeah, that's gone now again. So I think it was also part of the startup. So now when the next cars are appearing, then we should see it once more. There it is, so appearing right there. And when I'm hitting the turning indicator, it's also flashing to give me, like, let's say, an additional warning. So I would say still in the dynamic mode. Let's accelerate it out just a little bit more to see something more about how performant is it also at higher speeds. Let's say for 90 to 120. There we go, and that's already it. So you see this car does have a lot of power, you won't miss it. Yeah, it also has some kind of low frequency growling sound. Of course, not as much as you would have with the petrol engine, but you know, using the sound actuators, you can argue pro and con. The thing is, you know, you could also think about doing it with electric vehicles. So I think, yeah, you know, when you have the real one, surely that's somehow a different experience. But it's also quite nice to have this growling sound. It appeals. Why do people love the growling sound? It is being said that it somehow, you know, even refers to back, you know, before you were born, like, you know, low frequency sound you would be hearing then, and so on. So yeah, it's a tough question if that's really it. But definitely a very interesting one. And now there's a part with unlimited speed, and we can flow it even out more. Let me start from 100 kilometers or 60 miles and see if we can get it to 200. There's also a little bit bendy right there. Let's go. and that's 200 kilometers an hour, well, 25 miles. So pretty quick also when you're already picking up speed. Now those brakes, yeah, I mean, just slightly hitting those and very good deceleration. So awesome brakes they applied right here, really nice. Should you really go for the optional ceramic brakes is always the question, and I say rather not. They're very expensive. You just use them on the racetrack primarily. If you're not going to use them on the racetrack, you can also just leave them. They tend to collect some small stones, had experience with those already, and they want to be used. So if you're not using them in a harsh way at some point, it's also not good for those ceramic brakes. So again, just stick with the standard one unless you want to go to the racetrack, which is not really realistic option for this vehicle. The adaptive dampers that are standard with this car are doing a great job. So it is one where you would not exactly miss the air suspension. Here in the sports or dynamic mode, it's also a little bit stiffer. If I go to the comfort mode, the adaptive dampers react accordingly and also a little bit softer. That's good for a long run here on the motorway, for example, to give you a little bit more comfort. So I would rather recommend those, sports then or dynamic mode, when you want to let it fly on a countryside road or something. The air suspension is of course a good option, yes, and it will give you definitely more comfort and also bigger variety. The question is how long you want to keep the car. If you want to keep for a very, very long time, air suspension might also be more cost intensive if you repair them at some point. If you lease the car, you should definitely go for the air suspension, so to say. And if price doesn't matter that much. So we have another freeway on the German motorway, special episode about that today. Let's go again. Yep. Nice. Like this small truck overtaking here at about 130. That's what happens also on the German motorways. But that's also the thing, why you always have to be paying attention, hit the brakes as fast as possible. Really interesting. So the performance is really great from this car, and also the harmonious way the power is evolving. So the normal quattro setup, all-wheel drive, is 40% in the front, 60% in the rear. And the maximum setup would be 70% in the front is the maximum front figure, and 85% is the maximum rear figure. This car is also equipped with this rear differential lock they are offering optional. Here, just when running straight, it's not really much difference. It's more like when you accelerate out the corners, then it might, theoretically it makes sense to have those. Other than that, you can also just live without it. What is a cool option is the all-wheel steering, or the rear axle steering, you would say. And this is going at higher speeds now, 2% in the same direction as the front wheels. This gives you more stability. And when you're at lower speeds, below 60 kilometers an hour, then it goes 5 degrees. Let's say percent first, so always 5 degrees, 2 degrees parallel or 5 degrees in the opposite direction than the front wheels, and that reduces the turning circle by 1.1 meter, and it's really helpful to ease the car a little bit more around, and it feels more agile than at lower speeds. Since we're often also testing cars outside Germany. When we are testing cars in Germany, we really want to use, especially for our US fans, the motorway as long as possible, because that's something which is really special and unique here for Germany. And see, there are some parts where I can floor it out a little bit more. Always have to pay attention then, of course, because traffic is always there, unless you find such a part like this and drive it at 3 a.m. in the morning or something. So now we're changing the motorway. You might also have picked up, I was going really fast, and the noise is so low in this vehicle. As for the whole sound installation is superb, one of the best in the business overall. So it's a super silent and also relaxing ride. And that's also special about this, this S model. It is very performant, but at the same time, you can drive it as a long-term commuter. That's also what they thought about at Audi when they said, yeah, let's go for the TDI here. Of course, the main reason are the CO2 emission laws in Europe, which are paying more attention to CO2 than to NOx. NOx is, fiercer in the US. CO2 then is less for the US, so that's how strict the laws are for each countries. That's the basic difference. And so when they would offer, or when people would buy a lot of the big petrol engines here in the EU, then Audi at some point would have to pay fees, and that would be very, very expensive for them. So they try to push the people back to the TDIs again, that their fleet consumption remains lower, even though when they sell performance models. Very interesting. But at the same time, of course, they want to argue them pro their decision and say, and that's also right, of course, you have a better range with that, so higher range with the diesels here, and also better fuel efficiency. Of course, so far when I'm really flooring it out, we can't really talk about efficiency. However, we can. That's interesting. I mean, I've been flooring it out majorly, and we're about just over 10 liters on 100 kilometers, and wow, that's amazing. So that means, that was a lot of acceleration, but let's say you keep it just sometimes. Then I think even a performance realistic figure would be about 9 liters 100 kilometers. That's 26 mpg US, 31 mpg UK. That's really the performance figure. That's really astonishing, and a good way to test what is the minimum consumption is always here when you go to cruise control like Motorway, and then just take a look at how the consumption evolves after resetting, because this long motorway runs and you put it to the cruise control and you can see what's the consumption right there. And what has been really effective is also when you take a minimum consumption and the maximum, and then take the average of it, and usually it's very precise then. So what we do have here is about 6 liters on 100 kilometers, and that's of course pretty low. That's very interesting. By the way, here this predictive ACC, it's also realizing what traffic signs are ahead, now automatically reducing the speed to 100 down from 120. So it's also good to avoid speeding tickets, very important. Well, now even dropping more down in the consumption. So this concept here with the electric compressor together with the mild hybrid system, 48 volt board net, it really seems to work. And it's really interesting that you can get those low consumption figures in such a powerful vehicle. So yes, we can, troll Audi a little bit around with, you don't offer the petrol here, and yeah, those are fake exhaust in the rear and so on. And yeah, you can really talk about that, and it's not really what a petrolhead car enthusiast would wish to see. But then if you think about, you maybe don't want to spend so much time and so often at the fuel station, and you also want to have, a very high performance car, but at the same time want to think a little bit about the environment and think about, I don't want to use so much fuel, and due to the particulate filters here in the diesel, this is here, although it's an S6, it's not a super polluting car if you compare it to others. Of course, driving the EV, you are locally without emissions then, but from the overall perspective, if you use this one here as a long-term commuter, it's not recently we had the 6.2 V8 Cadillac Escalator, so with 13 liters, double the consumption of a performance figure here almost. And now we are when we're just cruising here on the motorway, we're below 5 liters on 100 kilometers, and that's more like Toyota Prius or something. That's really amazing. So, wow. So, and again, we think about, we have 5 liters as a minimum consumption here, and about 10 liters as a maximum. then something in the middle, so like 15, divided by 2. Yeah, that would be, now it's very, very hard calculations. 7.5 liters on 1 kilometers, as you know, like average consumption, you could easily score with that. And that indeed also comes close with our experience so far with the normal versions of this 3-liter TDI. So not just because you would buy this S model of the TDI doesn't mean you have higher consumption. Yes, you can use the car a little bit more than if you want with the high horsepower output. But again, this is probably, next to the Tesla Model 3 we had recently, which was like a high performance car, at the same time very low in the consumption, so high energy efficiency, but like for an ICE car, internal combustion engine car, this is probably the most efficient performance car we've ever driven. So I'm really astonished what we could score here as for the consumption. You know, by the way, it's also, we have a lot of speed and stuff, but here are not good to showcase here for the traffic jam, because we can set it here in this ACC mode once again. This is really good for the traffic jam, and let's see, when I'm here like at lower speeds, it should also not like, tell me like, oh, take your hands on the steering wheel immediately again. It does that when we're driving a little bit faster, but here in this traffic jam assist mode, it's still okay, and you can see this is really helpful, So when being in a traffic jam, you don't have like an accelerate, brake again, correct the steering and so on. So you can relax a little bit more in the traffic jam. I mean, it's annoying enough that we are in this traffic jam then, but for us here in the review, it's really good to test another feature of the car, and this is working very flawlessly here. Also see how the the corrections of the steering are being done, and that's really in this very, very smooth way. Now, please take over steering, direct your attention to the road. So now it's taking to, but you see, when you're driving at lower speeds, it takes a longer time until the car is really saying like do something. So yeah, for example, it's enough when I take the steering wheel here. So this is also like all the assistance systems they're offering here at a very high level. Really like that. Indeed, we talked about it quite a lot of times. As they style everything and as everything works, it's like a clinical clean car. What we say in German is something like this. We say klinisch rein. So there are a lot of things that are not maybe as emotional as with some of the other competitors. But everything in the execution, what they did here with the stuff they have available, is really flawless. Especially with a very comfortable yet performance ride, sound insulation wise, how the steering works. They have one of the best steerings because it gives you somewhat a natural feeling. It is very progressive. You don't have to steer that much, so you can keep both hands at the steering wheel all the time. Also, when you have like almost like a 90-degree corner, you have 90-degree steering wheel. You don't have to like oversteer all the time. So the steering they have here is one of the ones I like most. And if you remember our initial reviews of the Audi A6, what we had there is they were saying even in the base models, it feels very sporty overall, the car. So, and we recently also had a big comparison episode where we had like the 5 Series E-Class, this one here, the A6, and the Volvo S90, or there's an estate episode about that, and with the V90 of course. You should check out those as well if you're interested, in how it relates really from the competitors. And definitely I said that this one here belongs to the best in the business at the moment from the whole execution. So, had a big performance part, assistance systems we had in there. Also talked a little bit about technology. So yeah, if you would ask me, at some point a petrol head would still pick the V6 petrol, and yeah, it will somewhat be more fun to drive and will give you a better sound. And I was really skeptic before that, but if you now think about that, you can really score very, very decent consumption figure and still have a lot of power, maybe you might just think, then it's indeed not too bad to have just the diesel option here in Europe overall. Or what's your take on that? And now to our conclusion for today with the Audi S6. Well, Avant or sedan, that's of course a big question, but in Europe people would rather go for this one here, for the estate, because it's just more practical. In the US, however, sedan is always more popular. Then, in general, the exterior is, pretty sharp design and especially a little bit sportier here in the S version. Interior, a great build quality, really trimmed to perfection. Just of course still a lot of animal skin use in a lot of different trims, but at least there are also the Alcantara seats that will also come standard for the S models. Also advise you to go for those. Then the driving experience is a comfortable and sporty ride at the same time. The base A6 is already a very sporty one. This one of course tuned even sportier. The suspension also, it's really good also in combination with the big wheels as long as the roads are even. For a little bit more, bumpy roads, then I would recommend to stick with a little smaller wheels or maybe even upgrade it to an air suspension, which would be a great option to give you even more comfort. Performance-wise, with the discussion about petrol and diesel, again, as I said, the 2.9 liter V6 still be available in the US. It will sound better, yes. It will even be a little bit faster and a little bit more fun to drive. But this one here, the TDI version, has also a lot of power that was totally more than sufficient. And really interesting figure that we scored a very low consumption, over about 7.5 liters in 1 kilometers. And I think you can really live with that. And it would be one aspect, that you can have a good consumption, although driving a performance vehicle. And in that way, the diesel indeed does make sense. But what's your take on this very vehicle? Please tell it in the comments and also tune in to the next Autogefuehl episode.